Welcome to another Ember Weekend. I'm Jonathan Jackson.
And I'm Chase McCarthy.
And I'm Robert Jackson.
And we are here to talk about newsy stuff. And I think this time we're going to be talking about some RFCs again. I guess that's not really a surprise anymore, is it?
I don't think so.
Mostly RFC talk these days.
We got a lot of design work happening, so it's good. It's good
yeah,
stuff.
it seems like there is a lot of movement, a lot of momentum right now, which is really great. Great to see. I guess there's a couple of things that are worth mentioning, including the fact that I'm moving along with several of my colleagues to a company called Adapar. And obviously, I wanted to do a shout out 201, my former company, who is acqui-hired, I think that's the right term, to Adapar. They are former sponsors of ours. So it's really great to have a new story for them to tell.
Yeah, congratulations.
Woo.
Sounds amazing.
And then the other thing we want to mention is that there is an Ember.js documentary that is coming out soon. It will likely be released before our next episode. So if you're curious about seeing kind of the origins of Ember as told by the people who created it, it might be worth your time to take a look at that. And likely, if you're listening to this by the time of release, it's probably out. So take a look. And then lastly, I think we all have a confession. And the confession is that we're all hopelessly addicted to Monster Hunter World. Is that correct?
Longsword for the win.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Chase, and I have a problem.
I have a problem. You're doing the greatsword thing. I don't understand how you do that, man. Like, I just get my ass kicked every time I do that.
It's all right if you just want to take one swing every 30 seconds.
Exactly. Yeah. So I do have a joke around this, but unfortunately it requires some setup, and I'm going to forego the setup and just assume that you're intimately familiar with Monster Hunter, and that is we're going to make a new Ember rendering engine called Zenny. Anybody?
It sounds great. Yeah. For those of you like normal humans that don't know why that joke is maybe even remotely funny to John, the current rendering engine is named Glimmer, which also happens to be the in-game currency of my former favorite game, Destiny.
Well, and many others. I believe there was several core team members who were into Destiny.
Indeed.
My favorite part of that is that you just accidentally said the prior engine was called Glimmer, which means that we have official word that Glimmer's been deprecated in favor of Zenny. So
you know what? I'll send a PR after the recording.
Nice. That's really good. Yeah, get on that, Rob. And also, you should just reorchestrate the entire build system. Obviously.
Seems good. Let's do it.
But do it seamlessly, such that no one has to change any of their actual code. So.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead and just
you've got a pretty good track record of that, right?
Like, that's actually true.
Yeah.
Change the engine out of the plane while it's flying. Sounds good.
Yeah. That has been done. That has been done
twice.
At least once.
No, twice, right? Right? Because HTML bars, like that was a pretty big.
We did it in 110. We did it in 210. Yeah, come on.
Seems good. You just didn't notice.
Wasn't there
John?
a little friction in the first one? The HTML bars.
No one said the airplane didn't have to crash into the ground first. Come on.
Well, it just has to be changed while it's flying, and then whether it keeps flying is
exactly.
All right. Well, yeah, at least once.
For the most part,
greater
it
than
well,
one.
So.
Greater than or equal to one time.
For the most part, it
has been done.
Though.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, okay, enough about all that. That's ridiculous. Monster Hunter World, though, if anyone is interested in it, there's a games channel on the Ember.js Discord, and you should definitely reach out to me there. I guess we're just going to dive in. Let's do it.
I wanted to bring up a listener of the show, ping me after the last episode, or maybe the second to last episode, where we talked a little bit about GitHub notifications. How do we manage them? What do we deal with them? And they had suggested, at the time, I said, I'm mostly just using email because GitHub notifications on the website, the system on the website, is just horrible to use and go through. And this person suggested that I take a look at Octobox.io. Subsequently, like within a week of them pinging me about it, I also happened to see a podcast from the Changelog podcast with the creators of Octobox. And so I picked it up, started using it. I actually quite like it. It's reduced the amount of time that it takes me to work through my notifications by over half. It groups them better. It lets me filter them to weed out the bot noise versus whatever. All of those things I could have done with the email system, I just didn't. And I didn't really realize how much time I was wasting. And I quite like it.
So I'm going to listen to the Changelog podcast. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to before recording this, but what does this do differently? How does this distinguish itself from just regular old GitHub notifications? I know that there's some pain around things disappearing. Like after you've clicked them, they disappear.
Yeah,
but there's now a mark as
recently-
unread thing.
Yeah, GitHub recently added a thing to mark as unread, which would let you keep it or not lose the notification. But still, I kind of want the inverse. I kind of want to keep a thing until I say it's done or it's gone or I archive it. Oftentimes, I'll go to a link or an issue many times, or I'll read it and think about it and come back to it or whatever. And having to click mark as unread each time is pretty frustrating. The other thing is that it is currently in GitHub system hard to differentiate between sort of the noise and the signal. So you'll get notifications for things like bot merges or whatever, if you've got something like Greenkeeper or Dependabot or Renovate or one of those things set up. And oftentimes, I just don't care about those unless they fail CI, right? So I have a filter set up in Octobox where I suppress them by default, and I only look at them when there's actually a failure. Because normally, that's fine. The bot's going to do its thing. It's going to update the minimum versions. Once it's passed, it's going to auto-merge, and I don't ever have to look at it. That's the beauty of the system. So that's just one example. Another thing that's really nice is that it shows you, or you can easily see the reason you've got a notification. So if it was a mention, that's kind of higher weight to me than something I subscribe to but don't maintain, just as an example. So those are just some of the things.
When you mark one of these as read, does it get synced to GitHub? So like, does GitHub just delete it at that point?
Yeah. So there's two actions you can do in here. One is mark as read and one is archive. So when you mark as read, it does mark in GitHub as read. And when you archive, it also marks as read. But when you mark as read in Octobox, it's read. It's marked as read, so it's not bolded or whatever in the UI, but it stays in the inbox. It looks akin to Google, a Gmail inbox, right? So it stays there until you say archive it, like to complete it, essentially. So there's basically three states. There's unread, there's read, and then there's archived.
So that changes the entire thing from being a notification system to being an inbox.
Yeah, I mean, but I liked that before. I was using email before, so inbox is familiar to me.
No. I mean, I understand. I mean, it's
more like
you did make this strong case that that email has 30 years of tools. And
yes, and that's why other tools that work well are also built essentially on email workflows, right?
Oh yeah, no, of course, yeah, absolutely, yeah. It looks interesting. Is it a paid thing? I think I thought I saw a pricing.
It's paid if you want private notifications. So it's, I think, $10 a month, I think, if you want private.
Wait, what does private notifications mean?
GitHub recently allowed unlimited private repos for free, I think. It used to be paid. And if you want to see notifications for private repos, that is the paid feature.
Oh, I see. Okay. That seems pretty reasonable. Yeah. I mean, that means that for open source, you can use it for free.
Yep, exactly. And that's the goal.
Cool.
They actually, the Octobox folks had a recent blog post. I don't have it handy, but I can link it in the notes. A recent blog post about, they're basically trying to make Octobox a sustainable thing. So the two co-founders have been working on it for, I think, 6 months, maybe more, like full-time. That's their, job. But they're trying to also do the sustainable open source thing and have sponsor contributors and all sorts of stuff. So anyways, that's all in the podcast. You should listen to that for details.
Yeah, and while we're talking about managing your notification workflow and keeping up to date with things in the open source realm, could you talk us through this? You mentioned that we'd already probably talked about this, but there's like an RFC auto publish that goes to GitHub now?
Yeah, I think, I could have sworn we mentioned it at one point, but I believe that this is a very similar thing that the Rust project does, where the RFC's repo is auto-published to GitHub pages. And I actually quite like the presentation of this, like having all the RFCs listed here instead of having to go to GitHub and view each individual Markdown file in line. It's just kind of nice to be in the in sort of a more normal web format. It's also really quick to just really Command F, modifier manager, and hit go or something like that. It's really easy to find things. Now, that's still totally very easy on GitHub, so I realize this is a really small difference. But I like seeing it published on the web, and it's nice to link to it because you can link deeply to different headers inside the RFC, which is quite nice. Whereas on GitHub, you can link to the document, but it's hard to say, hey, go look at this specific section. It's hard to link directly to a deep section.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I think we might start doing at least some of our RFC links in our show notes this way because it looks a little nicer too, I think. Maybe that's debatable, but I think it looks nice. and just being able to have like a little more stable linkage.
Yeah, and I think the only caveat right now, and this may be permanent, but the only caveat right now is that the only thing that you see in this site is our merged RFCs. So any RFCs that are still pending, like for discussion, they wouldn't be here because they're still open PRs. This is only going to publish them upon merge, basically. Like it's like a CI job.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting about it is you can actually go through the numbers and see these gaps where like you can see what the success rate for an RFC is. It's
yeah, yes. The other thing is there's some of the numbers that are duplicated. So like there's 2 threes,
120.
There's 2 threes. There's 2. Yeah. So the reason for that is because we merged the Ember CLI RFCs with the Ember RFCs together. So there's only one RFC's repo. It's like the fire hose of RFCs. And that recently happened. I want to say it's just been a couple of weeks since that happened. But it's really good. It means that you can basically follow one repo and just unsubscribe as you need to different RFCs that you don't care about. But it makes it easier for folks to figure out where to submit changes and all that jazz.
Well, that's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to checking out Octobox and linking to the RFC stuff. So, Robert, tell me about Glimmer components, because the last time we talked, they were different than they are now, and they weren't merged, and now they are.
So this is a recurring theme. As we did a big roundup of a bunch of RFCs, I want to say 6 of them, I want to say. I don't know, it could be 8, I don't remember, but some large number.
Yeah.
A huge amount of those have been merged, which is great. The RFC process sort of helped iterate towards a final solution that worked really well. The RFC system let us iterate towards a solution that was good and solve problems. And in the Glimmer components case, we actually totally revamped the thing since we talked about it. So what happened was there used to be lots of hooks that were roughly analogous to the hooks that you imagine it being in Ember.component, like did render and did update and did insert element and all that stuff. And the final merged version of Glimmer component RFC has no hooks. Well, really, they only have the constructor and will destroy. That is it. All of the other hooks are gone. We don't have any of them. And I think that is a wonderful thing. It is way simpler to reason about and think about.
Okay. Could you explain the use case for, say, something simple like just attaching some jQuery thing to an element?
Yes. So this dives into element modifiers, which is another subject that we're going to talk about a little bit in this episode. But basically, the idea is since Glimmer components, the template of them are sort of outer HTML, the template, the root element in the template itself is actually the main element. So unlike Ember.component, where to access the root element or to decorate the root element or do anything on it, you have to do it in JavaScript land. In Glimmer component land, you can just put your normal, you just write HTML just like you normally do in your handlebars, and it just works, right? So because that's now simple, it's very straightforward, we don't need the JavaScript APIs to do the same work. So this is where we lean on the rendering element modifiers like did insert or did update or will destroy, and you just put those element modifiers right on the specific element that you want to have a function called when you insert it, and that's how you do it. So if you wanted to, you could literally write a did insert element method on your Glimmer component, and then in your top level element, you say curly did insert and say and then invoke this dot did insert element, and it's going to work. It's going to do the same thing you're used to.
Well, yeah, but the invocation is funny, right? Yeah, I just saw the RFC. The invocation has to be passed through the action helper.
So you either have to do that. So the idea is that the did insert is going to invoke a function. It doesn't bind it to anything, so it's just invoking a function. So if you just pass it an unbound function, it won't have the right this context if you care about that. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're doing like a pure function thing, so it's fine. But if you do care about it, you're either going to have to use action to get that binding. There's also a bind helper, which is a great add-on. Ember bind helper, I think it's called. Or there's a nice decorator that lets you bind in the JS space, which is actually a little bit nicer in my mind. So you can either mark it as @action, that works today with Ember decorators, or you can do @bind and pull in a bind decorator as well. The point isn't that you have to pass it through action. It's just that it's not bound. So if you want this context inside there, you're going to have to do something to make that happen.
Right. Like you could just pass this as the first argument and have context.
Yeah, you can imagine doing that. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think that seems really clean. So last we spoke, we were talking about how, like with element modifiers, you kind of don't need all the surface area. And it seems like the next logical conclusion before this thing got merged was it's like, hey, we can even take it further and push more responsibility into the element modifier RFC.
Yeah, it basically makes the template a more correct source of truth for the things that are involving the DOM. Another thing that, so I actually was very strongly opposed to this originally. And then I took a step back and tried to figure out why. And I started looking at apps that I work on and help with and maintain. And if you look at your components, at least in these apps that I looked at, I assume you'll probably have a similar result. But I was noticing that the vast majority of them actually don't use the set element or did insert element or these hooks. They're just doing like computer properties. They're like presenting stuff for the template to invoke computer properties and whatnot. They're doing some setup. They work with a service or whatever. They might have actions, but it's not really about specifically interacting with the DOM directly in JS space or using the insert element to do stuff. And I found that roughly 80% of the components that I did some quick math, roughly 80% of the components in these apps don't do anything with DOM, right, at all, right? They have templates, and that's how they DOM, but they don't need to reach in and touch this at element or this at dollar or any of that.
Yeah, I mean, with the possible and notable exception, like in my own mind, of like modifying the containing element. I think it's very frequent that you add classes to your
own. Yeah, but that's to your own element. And in Glimmer component land, you don't even need to do that because you would do that in your own.
Yeah,
in the template.
And that's already solved by
exactly. And I think Chris Garrett, actually, the author of many of these RFCs, I believe, said it really well, which is basically that it is generally uncommon to use the DOM in your component, but it's very common to have at least one component that you do need to in an app, right? So most components don't, but you're likely going to need one or two in an app that do that, right? So that leads us really well into the next item, which is that the rendering element modifiers RFC also merged. It proposes, but it changed a bit as well. And it changed from being a built-in functionality of the core system to being an add-on that you just install. So the add-on is published. It's called @Ember/render modifiers, and it provides did insert, did update, and will destroy modifiers.
Why are these not in the core of the framework? Why are these being added as an add-on rather than core? I feel like you, if you use Glimmer components, you must use these now.
So
with the
remember,
new RFC.
I just said that roughly 80% of your components won't need it because they don't. It just doesn't matter, right? So that's one reason. The other reason is because we don't think that we have cracked the nut, so to speak, or have the best solution for this yet. And I think we can continue iterating on it. And it's easier and better to do that in an add-on space, right?
In an add-on.
So
Okay.
it is not like one of those situations where this is add-on, go do this thing if you need to do it, but we think is bad. It's totally a thing we think you should use. The guides website will totally have like, in the section that currently is labeled, I think, component lifecycle or something like that, where it talks about did insert. It's going to say, DOM access. And if you're trying to do this thing, here's how you do that. You install this add-on, right? It is going to be a very first-party experience, and it's going to be normal. But when you're sitting down to write an app, you're not reaching for these things right away. You're going to reach for them eventually when you need them, but it's not going to be the first thing you need out of the box, right? And I think the nice thing about having them as an add-on means that we can iterate, we can work on different systems, different solutions, different possibilities, and I think that's a really good thing.
Right. And I made a note here just for my own edification around Ember render modifiers only allows you to use did insert, did update, and will destroy. Are those what is outlined in the RFC?
Yeah, that's exactly what the RFC proposes.
Okay, it's just those three. There's not like, so eventually you'll be able to do custom element modifiers.
So Ember 3.8 allows you to write your own modifier managers today, and you could make any modifier that you want, and you can implement the manager for it. Now, the problem is that the manager API it's a low-level API. It isn't pretty. There are some gotchas because it's low-level and it's meant to have lots of features, but not necessarily be the easiest thing to use, right? So we totally expect that people will write other add-ons that will make it easier, like simple modifier, like Ember simple modifiers or something like that. That's an add-on that I have generated locally but haven't finished writing yet. But essentially, like you should be able to write modifiers as easy as you write helpers today. I just have a base class. Maybe it's a pure function, maybe it's a this or that, whatever. And you should totally be able to write that. You should also totally be able to write the thing, the Reacty thing, where you get hooks and you can return a function, and that's your destructor and all that stuff. That all should be possible to do with the current API, but it's a little bit low level to really go to town and implement on your own. But the nice thing is that I I wrote for this Ember Render modifiers add-on, I also wrote a modifier manager polyfill, which works back. The CI of it tests back to Ember 2.12. I didn't go any further than that, but largely because I hit the end of the night and I fell asleep in my chair. So probably I didn't try. So Ember itself has had the concept of modifiers for a super long time. Like basically since 1.x,
ever since Action, right?
Yeah.
So 1.13.
I mean, in the early 1.0s, 1.x's, there was bind adder as well, right? And that was also so put your Wayback hat on for that one. But
wow,
that was before Ember 1.10.
True. Yeah, bind adder is in the same space.
Yeah,
that's true.
So it's basically the same kind of thing. The idea was I wanted to make it so that add-ons felt comfortable updating to use modifiers themselves. And given that there's like an angle bracket invocation polyfill, now there's the modifier manager polyfill, you could totally author an add-on in the new style and not have to drop support for your user, make a major breaking change and whatnot. Because like Ember 2.12 is actually quite old at this point. It's been unsupported by Ember itself for I don't know, a year, half a year, something like that. So it's
that's a really trippy thought actually, because we have several probably months or even a year of episodes where that's the thing we're talking about, like 212 plus.
Yeah, it's hey, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun in Emberland.
Yeah. The other day I had to actually like tell somebody like how long we've been doing the podcast, and I totaled it up, and I was like, oh my god, has it been that long?
Yeah. We started in 2015. I think.
Yeah. So 2.12 was released on March 15th of 2017. So it's been close to 2 years, not quite 2 years, but close to 2 years now.
So we have one more thing on our docket, specifically to talk around Ember modifiers. Could you tell me a little bit about splash attribute forwarding?
Yes. So first of all, just to recap, splash attributes are with angle bracket invocation, you can pass both arguments and attributes. That was one of the major features of angle bracket invocation. So if you prefix a hash argument with @ it's going to be an argument to the thing you're invoking. And if you don't, it's going to be an attribute to it. And wherever that thing puts ... attributes in its template, that's where those attributes are going to get applied to that element. So previously, you used to have to muck a lot with attribute bindings and components, especially if you're making third-party generic use components, where you might have to bind literally every possible attribute anybody might ever want from you, which is a very big list, by the way, even for simple things. So you don't have to do that anymore. They can just pass you attributes, and they get applied to wherever you put ... attributes in your template, which is great. Now, the question came up. The angle bracket RFC landed, and then after it landed, the modifier manager RFC landed, and the two don't really talk about each other at all, really. But the thing that's important is that the modifier is essentially in attribute space. It is basically an attribute. It gets to operate on the element. It can add attributes or classes or style or whatever. It can add listeners. It can do all sorts of things. So this RFC was a quick amendment to the angle bracket invocation RFC, which basically just says if you pass a modifier in the invocation, it is treated like an attribute and it's applied on the element on the inside. Now that opens up some pretty cool possibilities of composition in templates. For example, if you invoke a component with angle brackets, you can theoretically have a did insert that you attach that your callback will get called when that thing is appended to the DOM, which is kind of neat. You could also have like a click handler or you can add events and all sorts of things.
Aren't these different things though? Like I can imagine wanting to add invocation time, pass in these things as distinct things, like have the same rules as the splash attributes, but like put the class attributes on a thing, like the things that are literally like, class equals this or, style equals that, whatever, right? Pass that directly through, but then maybe I want to also pass in an element modifier and I want to invoke it on a very specific like div somewhere else. Is that a thing that's possible to do right now with this?
So first of all, the thing you're invoking doesn't get access to the attributes at all. It can't like iterate them. It doesn't get them passed. It's not. They don't see them. They don't know they exist at all. I mean, in theory, they could introspect their element and see there's extra stuff on it that they didn't put there. But that's basically it, right? So that's one thing. I could totally imagine you want to keep them, apply them to different places. And I think that's what you're saying. Like you might want to apply modifiers at this place and attributes in that place. Yes. But since a large amount of the attributes or the modifiers are going to be modifying attributes in the element, just like the attribute thing, it makes So to me, it makes most sense to think of them as, hey, anything modifying the element that is in dot attributes. That's like a conceptually similar box. So you can imagine, like, for example, something that wants to manage style in a more safe way than literally concatenating style strings, where you could do element and you just use the style dot like color or something, right? Like you actually set the individual subproperties like you can in like modern element stuff, and you can do that in a modifier, right? I think the idea here is that the call site gets to pass extra stuff, and you get to pick when you're invoked what element is really important for them to pass stuff to you. I think having there be separate things is actually more confusing than helpful.
Well, I just wonder though, because like I also think that element modifiers are going to be used to do tracking and analytics. I think that will be very common, and those are not attributes, and nor do they really end up doing the same thing.
I agree they're not attributes.
I think at that point you'd end up putting them inside of the component rather than passing them in attributes. I think maybe the argument would be that the element modifiers that you pass in at invocation site are going to be ones that are going to modify whatever is considered the
main
root or wherever
the
the attributes are going to end up going.
Yeah.
Which seems like a reasonable distinction, but I don't know how you do it, because I mean there's an actual thing inside of the Glimmer engine that literally looks for the actual string ... attribute, right?
And we could add another one theoretically and say ... modifiers if we actually cared. We did talk about that actually, having element ... yield or something like that to mean the opposite, or to have that be a superset of both attributes and modifiers, have something else that's all the things. But ... attributes as a name could just mean attributes, and ... modifiers could mean modifiers, and it'd be a global thing. We talked about that. We can still do that, but it's kind of like a Yagni sort of situation, right? Like we might need that, and when we do, we can run RFC, and it'll be great.
Yeah, I think that's
it's better to start. In my mind, it's better to start small and do a simple thing, and then
a simple thing that's convenient, and it's not like you couldn't work around it very, very easily by just moving the function to the subcomponent if you want it to be.
Yeah, and I think tracking is a great example where conceptually, if I'm allowed to pass attributes, like I might be able to style a thing specially, then the thing that I'm able to style is probably also the thing I care about, right? Like just generally speaking, like you're talking about page views and impressions, you're probably going to try to style it, for example, right? So it's a reasonable default. In the future, should we decide that we want to do a different thing, we can totally like either deprecate that attributes and make two different things, or just make it possible to specify them separately, or who knows? I don't know. But it was totally brought up, and like it's a good question.
I had an idea for one of your modifier helpers if you end up writing that. Which maybe this exists and you can just tell me, is there a way to call a modifier based off a name rather than knowing the actual thing? Like just like a call.
Stay tuned for another episode. There is an open RFC. There's an open RFC called, essentially what you're asking is, can you, like the component helper invokes dynamically, right? The same thing is true of, so today you can't do anything dynamic with helpers, and you can't do anything dynamic with modifiers. There's an open RFC that is called Contextual Helpers and Modifiers by Godfrey Chan. And that's what it does. It is in final comment period now. Hopefully it's merged in the next round of core team meetings and whatnot. And it basically proposes being able to create curried helpers. And whenever you render a thing that it's a renderable, and it sort of starts us down the path of things like named blocks and possibly template imports. So it's really nice.
All right, so that's all we have for this week. As mentioned, we already have stuff for next week, so stay tuned. I'm Chase McCarthy.
And I'm Jonathan Jackson.
I'm Robert Jackson.
And we'll see you next week.